Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife decided to move out from her husband to her lover while he can't see, but the unexpected happens. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. My 18-year-old daughter and I watched as my 25-year-old wife and boss, Chastity, loaded the last of her suitcases into the trunk of his car. He had come to pick her up that Sunday morning because they had a meeting on Monday in New York. They needed to fly out that evening to be ready and on time for the first of many meetings designed to discuss the case with the opposing party before mediation began. After 25 years of marriage, Chastity was still a very attractive woman. At 5 feet 5 inches, she still looked slim, though she had gained a few extra pounds over time. She had black hair and emerald eyes, and her curves were still in the right places. She had just turned 44 a couple of months ago. Chastity was a woman built for comfort and was happy with her life. We got married right after high school, and I worked to pay for her university while I studied online. The years had been kind to her, and childbirth had not changed her appearance. As soon as she graduated from law school, we moved back here to be closer to our families. By that time, we already had 2 children. In her first year of practicing law, Julie was born. I stood there, looking at him with conflicting feelings. I have to admit, I didn't like the smirk that idiot had on his face. From the look in his eyes, he thought he had outsmarted me. His self-confident behavior irritated me. I was 2 steps away from beating him. I wanted to say something so badly, but I bit my tongue. He wasn't worth it, and the woman he was carrying wasn't worth it either. They were driving because, as Chastity had explained to us more than once, it was their last attempt to settle a big civil case before going to court. She was so focused on her plans that she didn't notice from my words that I knew something else was planned. The problem for me with them was that I knew it because a little bird told me. That wasn't the only reason. They were going to St. Louis in an hour and then to New York that evening. Their first meeting with the opposition was scheduled for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Louise, who had never met me but contacted me through a phone call where I was working, had informed me of their plans. She claimed to be Michael's wife and wanted to warn me about what they were up to. We offered to take Chastity to the airport to see her off, but she made it clear that this was not necessary. Her boss, Michael, had left his car at the airport while he was away, and they were more comfortable doing it this way. It was maddening because they couldn't tell us when they would be back. There really wasn't much difference between me and that idiot. The height difference could be only 2 inches, if that, and he was about 6 years younger but not in better shape than I was. It didn't help that he was actually a nice-looking man. I knew it would be an equal fight. My daughter Julie, realizing that I was thinking about this, stood in front of me, making sure that I did not have the opportunity to jump off the step and confront him. She did the smart thing. If I moved, so did she, trying to keep me behind her. She did it to protect me from becoming a complete jerk. We stood on the porch and waved goodbye. No doubt Chastity was looking forward to wild nights with her new lover, Michael, in the bright lights of the big city. Chastity had been invited to the firm 6 years ago, and since she was promoted to associate partner 2 years ago, our lives had changed, and not for the better. The power of her new position seemed to go to her head. Unknown to anyone but me, Michael's wife, Louise, had contacted me a couple of weeks ago with many details about his past relationships with women who worked under him. Louise told me that this was the last time he would do this to her. They had set a trap for him. As soon as his car was out of sight, my daughter and I went inside. "Do you think Mom has any idea what we know about her plans?" Dad asked Julie. "That Michael is planning to add another notch to his belt with her?" "Probably not," I replied. She was never able to see beyond the smoke and mirrors, even with her legal mind. If she heard rumors about his past behavior, she ignored them because she never took idle talk seriously. Despite her legal expertise, she still can't understand it simply. Rumors always begin with a basis of truth about the person. Your mother still sees the world and others through rose-colored glasses. However, she will join this relationship voluntarily because she believes she won't be caught. For her, it was always out of sight, out of mind. She will see it as a vacation from the boring routine of our daily lives, I explained. It will be a rude awakening for her when she realizes she has simply become another one of the many women he has used. It will be even worse when she faces the reality of what she has done. My daughter looked at me seriously before saying, "Why do you say that? If you think that, why didn't you try to stop it?" "You know your mother as well as I do," I said. If I told her not to have an affair, she would deny that she was planning anything like that. She would simply say that I was jealous, immature, and childishly naive. The discussion would go downhill, resulting in a big argument that wouldn't lead anywhere. She would have left for the trip angry with me anyway and would have continued with her plan. As soon as they turned the first corner, she had already made up her mind. Nothing we said or did would have changed her opinion. "Does his wife know what's going to happen?" Julie asked. "Yes, and also her father," I said. "They already have the paperwork prepared to submit when they catch them. This isn't the first time he's done this. Louise has the names of other women he took as his last mistresses. Her children are grown enough for her to manage their needs without him, so she decided to destroy the facade they called marriage. He will be served divorce papers for adultery, and my wife will be served papers for interference with marriage. Will you forgive Mom, Dad?" Julie asked with a worried look. "Not this time," I said. "I already forgave her once. It's different for me, and she won't be forgiven. It's time to settle the score and move on." The moment she left, divorce was already on the agenda. She had her chance and missed it. I would remember the look on my daughter's face for the rest of my life. Neither she nor any of our children ever knew. It must have been a shock for her to find out that their mother had already cheated once. "Dad, you better explain that comment," Julie said, "because it just doesn't make sense." "Julie, you're the youngest, so what I just told you stays between us," I said. "Last time, it was before she found out she was pregnant with you and continued until she clearly started showing. If you were his child, I would have left her then. Luckily, the blood test confirmed that you were mine." The look of shock on my 18-year-old daughter's face was priceless. It was a family secret known only to three. For the sake of the family, we deliberately kept it a secret. "Who is he?" "Do we know him?" asked Julie. "This is a man I haven't spoken to in 18 years, I said. "Your kids all call him Uncle Charles." Julie sat there, taking it all in. Everything was becoming clearer to her. If Charles was present at a family event, her father never went. Her mother always drove them, but she deliberately tried to avoid Charles. Over the years, her grandparents celebrated Christmas twice, Christmas Eve with her family and Christmas with him. Now she understood why her father had never communicated or associated with her uncle. "Hey Julie," I said sarcastically, "maybe you should text your uncle and let him know that Chastity will be back at the market soon. Let him know what hotel they're staying at this week. With his past experiences with your mom, he might see this as a chance to reconnect for old time's sake." With these words, I went to the kitchen and started making coffee. With the Southeastern Missouri newspaper in front of me, I began scanning the classified pages for a place to rent while I looked for something to buy. I knew that until Julie graduated from university, Chastity would be allowed to stay in the house. I needed to move before Chastity came back. Judge Donald McDonald always put the needs of children first in all of his decisions. In many cases, this resulted in parents being dissatisfied. Not appearing in his court when ordered was tantamount to signing his own death warrant. I knew the results of many of his decisions, so I planned accordingly. I heard Julie's phone ring. I knew she had answered and was talking quietly to someone. I could hear her voice, but since she spoke very quietly, I couldn't make out the words. They had to talk for quite some time because I had made several calls and was getting ready to inspect several rental units. "Dad," Uncle Charles admitted the scam and asked how I knew about it, Julie said as she walked into the kitchen. I told him what was going on in our lives at the moment. He fell silent for a few minutes before saying that your dad doesn't deserve to have this happen to him. He said if you're willing to listen to his side, he'll be waiting for you. After 18 years, I have to admit, reflecting on that time, maybe it's time to hear my older brother's side. Chastity's behavior made me look at that time from a different angle. I saw their behavior then as a complete betrayal, but I stayed in the marriage for the sake of the children. I was old school. I didn't want my children to grow up in a divided home. I opened the liquor cabinet and pulled out a 40-ounce bottle of Jack before saying, "Julie, I need you to take me somewhere and then get the car back home. If either of us is sober by then, I'll be home. If not, when I wake up, I'll be there." He was waiting for me at our old favorite spot, a little fishing spot at the back of our father's property. At first, we just passed the bottle back and forth before he told me his side of the story. She was the complete opposite of what Chastity had told me, so I knew the truth had to be somewhere in the middle. After all these years, the truth no longer mattered. It was nice to hear him take responsibility for his behavior. With what my wife was about to do, I could now place more blame on her. Additionally, Charles had always been more of a follower than a leader. When we were both drunk, our father found us. He saw the fire we had lit and came out with a gun to investigate, thinking he would have to drive away local teenagers. He pulled us into the back of Charles's truck and drove us back to the farmhouse. Our mother, just like in the old days, took out her cast iron skillet to cook us some eggs and fried potatoes to begin the sobering up process. It had been a long time since I heard my father say, "If you boys want to get drunk and act like idiots, do it here in the back 50. Then, with a smile, he added, "Thank God you did it right." While we were eating, my mother called Julie and Charles's wife. By the time they arrived, we were starting to sober up, at least we weren't slurring our words anymore. Mary looked at us in bewilderment. Since she married Charles after everything happened, she had never seen us together. "Okay, you made up," Mary said. "After all these years, I think we all have a right to know what caused the separation in the first place." I was about to speak, but Charles pushed me, just like he did when we were kids. It was always his signal for me to shut up while he tried to get us out of trouble with our parents. He was always better than me at coming up with stories people would buy. I expected to hear another one, but I was wrong. Chastity and I, Charles began, we had an affair while she was pregnant with Julie. It was my fault. I was still immature and stupid. My younger brother, who was more mature, caught us. He told me then that I was dead to him in his eyes, and it was like that until today. My father, finally hearing the reason why Charles and I ended our relationship the first time, said, "Damn, if I were Clint, I would kill you." "What caused you to burst the dam?" Mom asked. "Chastity flew to New York with her boss," I replied. According to the hotel they were staying at, they only booked one room for the entire stay. Louise, Michael's wife, and her father have private investigators on them. I will be providing Ed with copies of their claims, videos of them being served with claims, and any other evidence they find. I realized as I said this that Julie had learned that her mother and Michael had been planning this for a long time. This was hard for Julie to realize because now it seemed to her that her mother was looking forward to it. Julie now understood why I had behaved the way I did. "I should have let you go after that idiot, Dad," my daughter said, looking me straight in the eyes. No one knew what to say, so I added, "Since Chastity will be allowed to keep the house while Julie lives there and goes to university, I need to find a place to live before she comes back." "Dad, I'm not going to live with Mom," Julie said. "Where you go, I will go. We will do it together." Julie was like me when she said something. She meant it no matter the cost. "Julie, come with me for a minute," Mom said, and they went upstairs. My parents' house was a huge 2-story farmhouse. By the time they returned, they had decided that Julie and I would move in with them for the time being. All we needed to take with us was our clothes. On the way home, my daughter told me off. "You need to stop defending Mom or any of us, Dad. We're all adults now." She went to New York knowing full well what she was going to do with Michael, believing she wouldn't get caught. To me, that shows what she really thinks about us. After we got home Monday night, we began slowly moving the items we wanted to keep. Each of us took our favorite things. I took my rocking chair, and she grabbed her makeup table and mirror. Chastity called throughout the week to keep us informed of what was happening. There was progress, but it was slow. Louise called because she decided that we should finally meet. We agreed to do this Thursday night at Logan's Roadhouse around 8. I arrived in work clothes without a tie. She was there dressed in a dress and skirt. I recognized her by the white scarf she was wearing and went over to introduce myself. She was pleasant to look at. It was obvious that she was several years younger and as healthy as a horse. She had long blonde hair, soft blue eyes, and a slender figure that commanded attention. Her curves were an open invitation to most men to look inside and get to know her. She was naturally strikingly beautiful. What impressed me most about her figure was that she dressed conservatively. Michael had truly proven himself to be a fool, in my opinion. Having such a treasure at home and going after my wife, who was at least 5 years older, just didn't make sense to me. Why would anyone go for comfort food when they have prime meat right in front of them? I found out that she is indeed 10 years younger than me, and her 2 young daughters were 8 and 10 years old. I explained that I have 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, ranging in age from 23 to 18, but only one still lives at home. She was a kindergarten teacher, which now made it clear why she dressed the way she did. I worked as a human resources manager at a nursing home in the city. I kept thinking that my teachers in elementary school were never this attractive. It was Louise who informed me that they would still be in New York for the weekend because they had finished about 70% of the work on settling the details. After that, they would need to translate everything into legal language and sign an agreement before they could leave. They would be served late on Sunday evening and early Monday morning when they were awakened from a sound sleep. The hotel security service, having received management approval, would allow private detectives into the lover's room. She asked me how I was handling it. I said, much better than last time. We all ended up talking about it, and I noted that the main difference between this time and the last was that this time it was intentional. Last time, everything was so black and white. She asked if I knew who was first. I told her it was my older brother, over 18 years ago, before my youngest child was born. Until this week, we hadn't spoken to each other in 18 years. We made peace last Sunday after I told my daughter Julie about it. I said, she made us work the way we did when we were young. I had the worst hangover I've had in years. Louise laughed, and I added, it makes it even worse that our father caught us like he did when we were prepubescent teenagers and dragged us home like we were still wet behind the ears. Louise thought it was funny, but said it must be nice to be around her parents. I told her that my youngest daughter and I would be moving in with my parents until I found a new home for us. I took my tools, sporting weapons, and clothes and left the rest. I would keep Chastity's cell phone number active until Sunday evening and then block my wife's number forever. Before leaving for the night, Louise and I danced a few times in a nearby bar. I went home in good spirits, all things considered, and was questioned by my daughter Julie. She knew everything or should have known everything. The next day, while we were getting ready, Julie continued to tease me, repeating over and over again, Daddy has found a new girlfriend. Julie and I enjoyed a fantastic Sunday dinner, and my parents were already fully settled. It was a special time for my mother because she had to cook for the group again. She was delighted that we both ate so much and that there weren't many leftovers. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I received a call that woke me from a sound sleep. Louise called to confirm that when the hotel detective let them into the room, they were both asleep. Cameras filmed the whole thing while they were being served in bed. She sent me a temporary copy of the video. I got out of bed, put on my trousers, and went downstairs to make some tea. I had just made myself a cup of hot black tea when my mother joined me. Is the water still hot? She asked. I got up to make her some tea and showed her the video I had just received on my cell phone. I listened and watched as my mother's expression changed. Chastity and Michael were caught without clothes under the sheets, their recorded voices expressing shock. Both looked like deer caught in headlights. No one who saw it could say that what they did was completely innocent. She immediately sent a copy to her own cell phone before putting it down. We're done with Chastity, Mom said. I love the complete shock on her face when she was served with the civil suit. Julie and I blocked her phone number tonight, I said, because I was warned that they would be served with lawsuits tonight. Mom took her and Dad's cell phones so I could show her how to block numbers. It had been a long time since my mom and I shared tea in the middle of the night. It brought back many sweet memories for both of us. I walked in and told the receptionist to block all incoming calls from my wife because I didn't want to talk to her. Around 11 o'clock, she came and said, "Listen, she calls here every 20 minutes. How can we stop this? What's your mobile number?" I asked. She gave it to me. "I'm texting you a video clip," I said. "Next time she asks to talk to me, ask for her cell number. If she gives it, Send her a copy and let her know by text that Julie and I received it last night. That was the last time I saw her. For the rest of the day, she said, I did what you asked. Once she got it, there were no more calls. It intrigued me, so I looked it up. If your daughter or you need anything, just call, okay? I nodded my head affirmatively. Thanks, boss, she said. I deleted it and didn't tell anyone. While my mom was preparing dinner, before Julie went to help her, I told my daughter about what happened at work. I got a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Julie said it was from my mom asking me to call her. It didn't take long to realize it was probably Michael's number. I think your brothers will call us around 8 o'clock this evening, I said. Your mother will call them. They're probably already at the house and found us gone. If they do, they'll be shocked. Julie suggested, let's turn off our cell phones so my brothers will have to contact Mom to find out what's going on. That's what we did. For my daughter and me, it was a peaceful night. For others, it was not. We found out later that my sons actually came to our former home. As soon as they walked through the front door, they discovered that my favorite chair was missing. This led to a search of the entire house. It quickly became clear that Julie and I had moved out. It was only when they entered the kitchen that they found their sister's note. When they called Julie and me, their calls automatically went to voicemail, which made them even more frustrated. They were confronted by their mother on her cell phone, who claimed she didn't understand what the note meant. She also told them she didn't understand why we moved out. They called all over the city looking for us, but to no avail. Finally, in desperation, they called their Uncle Charles, who told them that after what their mother did the second time, perhaps his brother didn't want to be found. So Jason and Justin told their uncle about the note and what it said. All I can say for sure is that Michael is your mom's boss, and they've been sharing a hotel room in New York for over a week, Charles said. You're old enough to draw your own conclusions from this. The boys were so shocked by this that they forgot to ask themselves how and why their Uncle Charles knew about it. My sons, in their search for Julie and me, spread the news of the breakup between me and my wife faster and more widely than gossip could have. By the end of the next workday, my secretary forwarded a call from my oldest son, Jake. After the greetings, he got down to business. What's going on, Dad? He asked. Where do you and Julie live now? Not much, considering that in our world, what was wrong is now right and what was right is now wrong, I replied. Dad, let's not get into religion, he said. Just tell me the facts. Check your text messages for what I just sent, I said. This will answer your question. Send this to Jason, and if you want to talk, come see my father after dinner. With that, I hung up, texted the video, and sent one to Julie to let her know what I did. Less than 10 minutes later, Jake texted back, Damn, I'll be at Grandpa's at 8. My parents left my kids and me alone so we could have a serious conversation about our current marital status. Julie and I listened to what they thought I should do next. The boys did not see their mother's actions as a serious problem and believed that I should just get over it. We all make mistakes, Dad. Look how many times you forgave us when we were growing up, the boys said, which angered their little sister. You may be my brothers, but you're both idiots, Julie said angrily. It wasn't a damn accident. Mom and Michael planned everything. The hotel room was reserved for Mr. and Mrs. D. Michael trusted God a week before they left. As I watched your faces, it was a look I will never forget. We watched Mom leave our house that Sunday afternoon. She left knowing she was going to cheat, Julie continued. She made him pick her up and seemed worried about what she was getting into. Dad offered to take her to the airport, but no, she wanted to rub it in our faces by leaving with him. We were probably what they were laughing at on the way to New York. She didn't know that we knew and didn't realize we were seeing through their facade. Julie asked me why I didn't stop her, and I told her she would have lied and denied it. I continued, Your mother's actions made it clear that she was leaving the marriage. This was not an accident, it was all planned and intentional. Dad and I knew about it 2 weeks before she left, Julie said. Michael's wife warned us. That's why we had the video within an hour of them being served with the lawsuits. Boys, you have to understand that your mother didn't just do this to me, I said. She did it to all of us. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow to get tested for STDs. All my children looked at me with amazed eyes. I'm doing this because I can't be sure she didn't have other lovers on the side, I continued. This may be the first time she's been caught. She's been on business trips quite often over the past few years. Her behavior makes me wonder if these trips had a different nature. Dad, you can't be serious, Jason said. There's no chance that my mother had other lovers based on what we have learned. Can we all agree that we will get the truth about these questions from her? I answered, the truth doesn't matter, the facts do. If I don't have an STD, then we know that what you believe can be true. When there was no response from my 3 children, I said, it's time for me to go get a cup of coffee. My parents were in the kitchen and had heard the entire conversation. Clint, you're approaching this right, my father said. I wouldn't have thought about the possibility of others. As an attorney at a firm that partly sues the medical industry and pharmaceutical companies, it does raise the possibility that she slept with others. She was always flying off somewhere because there have always been mediations before the court. Even if she had separate numbers on these trips, all it takes is a call from one number to another. Since in our society, one truth can be another's lie, I cannot afford to trust everything she's been saying these last years. At that moment, my mobile phone rang. It was Louise. I said I should take the call in private, so I went out onto the veranda. Hi, Louise. Good to hear from you, I said. What's happened? I talked to Michael. It didn't go well. He doesn't understand why I'm filing for divorce, she said. He thinks I should forgive him and move on with my life as before. I told him that my daughters are old enough now, and I don't need him in their lives. That's when he realized that I no longer have love for him. He killed her through his false ways. Chastity, he says, is in a bad place now that she's not working. She's trying to figure out how they could have done all this. Looks like they'll be back home Thursday afternoon because an agreement has been reached. Julie, my daughter, and I'd blocked her number. I explained. I told the receptionist not to take calls from her. It got so bad that she asked me to make them stop. I gave the receptionist a copy of the video you sent and told her to forward it to Chastity. That stopped the calls. My wife now knows that we all know what happened. It must be hard for her to realize that she can no longer control the situation. I told Michael that his personal belongings would be kept in the garage until he retrieves them, Louise said. Then I told him that I had already changed the locks on our house. I just wanted to see how you dealt with it. I just finished a long conversation with my 3 children, explaining that this may not have been her only scam, and that's why I'm going to get checked out. When they asked why I thought it was necessary, I said, do you think your mother would honestly admit that she had other lovers? I guess I'm just taking it one day at a time. Julie and I moved out. We talked a little more before wishing each other good night. When I returned to the house, they were all in the kitchen. All 5 of them looked at me as if they were waiting for me to say something. I'm taking the day off tomorrow, I said. I have an appointment with a lawyer at 9 o'clock in the morning. Since the 2 lovers may be returning home on Thursday, I would like them to be served with their lawsuits when they get off the plane. I think that's when my sons finally realized the gravity of the situation because they started to have tears in their eyes. Then my father said, Jake and Jason, Michael wasn't the first man your mother was caught with, but he will be the last. He's a more manly man than I am because I would have killed the first son of a. That's nonsense, Jason said. Mom said she had never cheated before, and until we showed her the video, she denied having an affair. You are idiots, my mother said. Why do you think your father never spoke to your Uncle Charles until this week? They finally made up about it on Sunday night. The boys were amazed and looked at their sister. Uncle Charles admitted it, she said. He said our dad didn't deserve it, but he did. When I told Dad that Uncle Charles and I had made up, the emotions were raw for everyone involved. I got up and put the kettle on. All 3 of my children experienced the consequences of their mother's behavior in their own way. As their father, all I could do was be there for them. I knew it would change their lives in the future, even though they might never see it. How they deal with this will forever determine what kind of people they become. The boys decided they would rather go home and prepare for the workday tomorrow. By the time they left, the kettle was boiling. I prepared a cup of hot tea for myself and my mother since it was almost 11 o'clock. Julie climbed into bed, leaving me and my parents a chance to talk. They'll be watching you, Mom said. How you handle it will give them guidance. I know, Mom, I said. So I'm going to try to stay calm. To do that, I need to leave it to the lawyers. I can't go back in time and change what happened. Other than killing her, the rest is really out of my hands. For some, this would be the final decision, my father admitted honestly. You're right, but in my opinion, Chastity isn't worth going to jail for. So does Charles, I said. My father looked at me with pride in his eyes and said, You are a better man, son. Your mother and I should have raised you right. The lawyer I contacted listened intently as I recounted the events that led me to her office. It was interesting to watch her take notes. When I mentioned the name of the company where my wife worked, her eyes lit up. Mr. Clint Walker, did you know that I once worked for them? She asked. They have a code of ethics that is written down in the HR manual, which I still have a copy of. I think she saw my interest because she added, We might sue the firm in addition to both of them. We might not get much more than legal fees, given the way state judges look at things at present, but it will create serious problems for both Brenda Ferguson and the company. Let's do this, I said. As far as I know, they are returning from New York and will be here on the first incoming flight from St. Louis on Thursday afternoon. After I left a deposit for her services, she said, I'm looking forward to it. When they fired me, they said I had no desire to follow through. They'll soon find out how wrong they were. I left her office thinking that David was going toe-to-toe with Goliath. The company where my wife worked was the largest in the area and had 4 divisions. Our family doctor was shocked to learn why I wanted to be tested for intimate transmitted infections. He had been our doctor all the years while our children were growing up. He would never have expected this, but he figured it was better to be safe. What I didn't know was that my oldest son, Jake, called his mother after leaving his grandparents' house to let her know what was going on. When he told his mother that I was taking tests to make sure I was clean, she asked why. He told her directly that between Uncle Charles and Michael Truscott, no one in the family could say for sure that there were no other lovers when she was not at home. She wanted to say something, but Jake told her not to worry because she had been caught lying too often. Give things some time to cool, Mom, before you explain anything, he said, because now we'll take it as just another lie. The company where my wife worked was fined while the lovers were on the road. My lawyer asked for $10 million. She also made clear in the suit that the dismissal of the senior and junior partners would be considered an admission of guilt. The moment the 2 lovers got off the plane, they were met by a procedural officer. It was noted by a third party that they did not appear to be a happy couple and that my wife had to take a taxi home. The doctor called me for an appointment for a shot, and it turned out I had a mild STD. Because it had to be reported to the county health authorities, Chastity was called in and forced to reveal all of her intimate partners. My lawsuit was made public on the 6 p.m. news. Chastity and Michael's behavior became public knowledge. Brenda Ferguson began to act quite effectively. Julie called me in response to my text message while she was moving from class to class, and I gave her the news of what the doctor had said. She called her brothers and told them that their mother must have had more lovers, explaining why. I sat with my parents and my daughter while they ate. I declined because I had a dinner date. My always curious daughter asked if I was with the same person as last week. When I answered yes, she smiled and winked. As I was leaving, she sent me a text message that said, Daddy has a girlfriend. I was pleased that despite everything going on, she could still find humor in it. Louise Truscott smiled when she saw me as I walked into Red Lobster. This time, I dressed informally, as did she. You don't do small things, Louise said with a laugh. My dad says you're a rock star and he loves it. If that doesn't take Michael down a notch, nothing will. The lawyer I hired used to work for them and is using me to get back at them, I said with my permission. She's got a copy of the HR management policies that allows us to sue them for not following their policies. I'd like to be a fly on the wall in their office tomorrow, Louise said. It won't be a good day for them. The waitress then showed us to our table. We both ordered alcoholic drinks, after which Louise handed me an envelope. Inside is a certified statement from 5 of Michael's subordinates, she said. They were all employees at the time. Their statements make it clear that they were forced to satisfy his intimate needs. Oh, my case in court just got stronger, I said. To be honest, when she suggested this course of action, I thought that because of the way judges look these days, we'd be happy if we won enough to cover her legal fees. But this could go a long way toward establishing a long-term pattern of behavior. We both went through divorces and began to develop a friendship. I even started to enjoy the time we spent together. It was almost midnight when I returned to my parents' house. I sat in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil so I could make myself a cup of tea before bed. It gave me time to reflect on everything that had happened since Chastity left on her trip. I was pouring hot water into a cup when my daughter said, "Daddy, make some for me too, please." I looked at my daughter and realized she was crying. It's okay to cry. It's part of healing. I'm surprised you lasted this long, I said. She threw herself into my arms and burst into tears. I just held her until she calmed down. By the time we drank our tea, she had settled. She asked me how my dinner with Louise was. Honestly, we were just getting to know each other better, but it looks like it will turn out to be a good friendship, I said. Julie asked a few questions about Louise, and I answered them to the best of my ability. I took the statements to my lawyer at lunchtime on Friday. When she called me later that day, she said she was busy getting certified statements about another senior partner at the firm and asked if she could take it on as a class action for all the women involved. This meant resubmitting and asking for a significantly larger amount. I told her to continue. Before saying goodbye, she mentioned she had learned from a friend that it had been a very difficult day for Chastity and Michael. Even though they brought home a huge settlement and made millions for the firm, there was no mention of it. The employees I worked with were very supportive, as were other people in senior management. I went to the bank and withdrew $1,000 in cash. On the way home, as soon as I returned, I hugged my mother and stuffed the money into her apron. She noticed and looked at me with a look only a mother can give her son. "Just consider it a donation to help cover your extra expenses while we live here," I said. "Anywhere else, it would have cost me a lot more." She was about to say something, so I looked at her so she would speak. "Only this time it won't happen again, understood?" she said. I nodded, grateful that she let me get away with it. Chastity returned home to an empty house, having survived a day where she was treated like a disease. Both Michael and she were effectively unwanted guests. Her husband and his lawyer were suing the whole firm. She couldn't understand how her husband, Clint, had managed to find a disgruntled ex-employee who would never have made partner to represent him. It was not the fact of the lawsuit itself that was important. What mattered was that Clint used someone who knew all the tricks they would try to minimize the claim before moving forward. This put the firm at a disadvantage from the very beginning. Finally, having made herself a rye cocktail, she sat down and read the divorce petition to the end. She then realized that both her husband and daughter knew about their plans. They even knew that they were registered as a couple. Clint now had to see that this turned out to be the end of their marriage. She, not seeing this, sent a message to her husband and daughter that was now quite clear, even if it wasn't true. There was no way to undo the damage she had caused. Her best defense would be to stall until Clint calmed down. Maybe then they could talk. Jake was right, everything she did now seemed like a lie because of how everyone saw what she had done. None of this was worth what she was forcing everyone to face. She walked out the front door to get the mail, thinking it couldn't get any worse. While going through it to sort through the junk, she found an envelope addressed to her from the county health department. After opening the letter, she discovered that I had contracted an STD. Chastity was asked to come in for a checkup. Chastity sat down and started crying. This was becoming a real nightmare for her. There had been several chance encounters on business trips in recent years. Clint would tell their children the results. Her family would now think that she was just a. Michael Truscott sat behind the counter in a dark bar on the cheap side of town, drowning his sorrows as he tried to understand why his wife Louise had filed for divorce. She had forgiven him for all the other times, which is what made this time so special. He really wasn't paying attention to what was happening around him, so he didn't notice the man who sat down on the stool next to him. Loud voices came from the other end of the hall, attracting everyone's attention. This quickly escalated into a fight. Michael turned to look, just like everyone else, and was hit not once but 3 times very hard in the face. A voice from somewhere said, "I'm a friend of Chastity's husband, Clint. Every time I see you, I will do it again." What gave you the right to destroy the life of a good man? The only thing you could see through the blood and pain was that it was one huge African American. I knew that the situation with my eldest son Jake had to be resolved. It happened on a Saturday afternoon while I was cleaning out a couple of paddocks in my dad's barn. Jake was very stubborn, and once he made up his mind about something, no one could change it. He visited his mother in the morning. Chastity took it badly and spent a couple of hours crying on his shoulder. He decided that it would be best for everyone if I took her back and we all continued to live as if nothing had happened. I knew there was no point in arguing with him, so I let him talk until he had let it all out. "Jake, if you were married," I said, "and found out that your wife was sleeping with others, would you take the advice you gave me?" He fell silent, so I added, "You come here and tell me that I've had enough of marrying her and that I should shut up and enjoy her presence in my life. This means that, in your eyes, I'm just a non-entity that everyone should trample on." His face turned white because he had never seen me like this. I was upset, so I added, "If you don't respect me as a person, as someone capable of making my own decisions, don't come here again." I walked away, leaving him standing with a huge dose of foot-and-mouth syndrome. He was young and foolish, like I had been in my youth. He reacted without hesitation. Now he had to face my reaction. Jake, not fully understanding his behavior, went to talk to his uncle Charlie. After hearing what happened, Charlie told Jake that it reminded him of how foolish he was at Jake's age. "Your mother was after me, Jake," Charlie said. "I fell in love, and it cost me 18 years of separation from my brother. You need to understand that there are always two sides to the story. Both parties express their emotions, and everything they say about the situation is colored by that. Your father is right. Your mother did not get the STD from Michael. So whoever it was, she brought it home and shared it with your father. To me, this proves that she saw my brother as nothing," Charlie added. "After everything he did for his family, this was his final reward. You tell them to accept this fact and live with it. It only made your father angrier. How you fix it is your problem," Charlie said. "But correct it, because if you don't, you may lose your father forever. Our father always said that you give a person who hurt you one chance. If they do it again, they're done. Your mother took her chance with me. It's sad that by her behavior she showed she never learned anything." It was a great day. On Monday morning, at the firm where Chastity and Michael worked, my lawyer had dropped my lawsuit against the firm, so they both returned to good standing. They were praised throughout the day for the outstanding settlements they achieved for their clients and the proceeds they earned. Michael Truscott looked terrible but managed to cope. He had 2 huge bruises and a cut above his left eyebrow. In one private moment, he walked into Chastity's office to tell her what had happened and what had been said as a result. Chastity was standing by my car as I left the nursing home that day. She looked tired and exhausted. When I came out to her, I had to be very careful about what I did or said. "Call off your dogs," Chastity said. "Michael has enough problems of his own without your thirst for revenge." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said honestly. "He was beaten," Chastity continued. "The man said that he is your friend, and every time he sees him, he will do it again." I started laughing. I thought this was one of the best pieces of news I'd had in recent weeks. Having calmed down, I said, "If I knew who it was, believe me, I would buy that man a large bottle of whiskey as a token of gratitude. I think your lover got off easy. If it were me, he would already be dead." Then I received a text message. I looked at it and saw that it was from Louise. She wrote that I should come to her as soon as possible because it was important. As soon as I read this, another message arrived with her address. I replied that I was already on my way. "I've never seen you so cold and cruel," Chastity said. "It shouldn't be like this. Get your damn lawyer and let's get a divorce already." I got into the car, started it, and drove away, leaving her standing there. I was done with her lies and ideas of morality forever. Louise was standing at the door as I arrived. It was obvious that she was very upset. "What's happened?" I asked as I approached the front door. "Is there something I can help solve?" "My dad's friend made his cousin beat up Michael," Louise said, "and used your name to send a message." I guess my huge smile said a lot. Relief quickly appeared on her face. "Are you not angry or worried?" she asked. Relieved? Not at all. I just wish I knew where he lives so I can send him a thank you whiskey, I said. Automatically, I hugged her for a moment. Louise didn't resist. Reluctantly, I let her go. I was about to apologize, but she stopped me with a kiss on the cheek. They are both inside and want to work things out with you, Louise said, taking my hand. We held hands as she led me to the kitchen. I saw her daughters peeking out from one of the bedrooms, so I winked at them with a smile. They answered me the same way. Louise's father was a little younger than mine, but I treated him with respect. When I saw the huge African-American man, I smiled. If you were of age, I said, I would send you a large bottle of whiskey as a token of gratitude. After that, I extended my hand to him as a sign of friendship, and he accepted it, adding, next time you want to do something stupid, ask yourself if it's worth going to jail. My father told me that when I was your age, and it saved me a lot of trouble. With the tension relieved, formal introductions were made, and before long, her father said it was time to take the young man home. This left Louise and me with her 2 children. Her daughters came out and introduced themselves. Livia was 10 years old and Lori was 8. I asked them about their favorite restaurant, and they said it was an all-you-can-eat pizza place called Zeiss. I got down on one knee and said, would you young ladies allow me to invite you and your mother there for dinner? Perhaps it was because of my suit without a tie, but they both immediately said yes. Well, there's one thing I need to do before we can go, I said. What is it? The girls asked. I need to call my mom and let her know I won't be home for dinner. They thought it was funny and laughed. By the time we got to Zeiss, Louise and I walked in while the girls ran ahead. As we sat down, one of Louise's colleagues saw her. When Louise approached for more pizza, a colleague stopped to talk to her. Are you Mom's boyfriend? Livia asked. I'm a guy and I'm her friend, I replied, not knowing where she was going with this. Did you go on a date? Livia asked insistently. I haven't invited her yet, I replied, but I would have to get permission from someone else before I could do that. From whom? Asked Lori. From you and your sister, I said. The girls laughed before they both exclaimed, you can because Mom already says she likes you. When Louise returned to our table, she found us laughing and talking happily, as if we were old friends. I said I was going to get some more, and Lori said she would come with me. So off we went. Lori decided she was ready for dessert, and I put what she wanted on her plate. I thought she would return to the table, but she waited until I had helped myself. Once we got back to their house, I escorted the 3 ladies to the front door. As Louise opened the door, I lowered myself to my daughter's level and thanked them for having dinner together. As soon as the door opened, the girls ran inside, getting ready for bed. Then I decided to say goodbye. Since I was extremely inexperienced in dating, I decided it was best to just say goodbye. After saying goodbye, I got ready to leave. Come back here, Louise said. I turned on the steps so that we were face to face. Louise leaned over and kissed me on the lips. I reciprocated her feelings. My daughter said you were going to ask me on our first date, Louise said. Livia made a mistake, Louise added. Louise took me by surprise, so I began to explain what happened while she was talking to a colleague. Then Louise and I sat on the front porch like teenagers discussing the situation. It took us a while to both admit that we were interested in each other but were worried about what we were facing. Since it was almost the end of September, we decided to take the girls to the town fair the following Saturday and then decide what to do next. It was almost 10 o'clock in the evening when I arrived at my parents' farm. I went into the house and found that everyone was still awake. Julie immediately noticed my good mood as soon as I walked through the door. Dad has a huge happy smile on his face, Julie said. The meeting must have been really important for him to be so happy. I told my parents and daughter about the events of my day. After I left for work, my father thought it was funny that Chastity asked me to leave Michael alone because he already had a lot of problems. On Friday, my lawyer filed a new lawsuit against the firm. The suit named for senior partners and 16 female victims, and I tried them jointly. Copies of the claim were delivered to the senior partners' homes. 3 of the older partners were told by their spouses not to return home. Brenda Ferguson continued her campaign of calling Chastity to find out the name of her divorce lawyer every day. My mother had email addresses for many of Chastity's relatives. That night, before I returned to the farm, she sent each of them a copy of how Chastity and Michael were served with the lawsuit. The text said that this was not the first lover Chastity had on these so-called business trips, it was just the first time she got caught. Clint contracted an STD. I was getting ready to go pick up Louise and the kids when Julie said, "You really love Louise, don't you?" "Julie, the sad fact of life is that since the divorce started," I said, "a lot of the friends your mom and I had over the years have disappeared. Louise and I bonded over shared experiences. Because of this, it was easy for us to trust each other. It's too early to tell where our relationship will lead, but I'm open to it. Dad, if you need dating advice, don't hesitate to ask," Julie said with a smile. "Just promise me that you will introduce us to her before things get too serious." It seems that Louise was afraid of heights, so I spent about an hour with her daughters on the Ferris wheel. At their age, it was a favorite pastime. We played it by ear and just enjoyed the moment. All four of us then headed to the food area. The children decided that they were hungry. Lori sat on my shoulders because she was tired. We were queuing for food when my brother Charles and his wife found us with their two youngest. The elders were somewhere with their friends. Presentations were made, and Mary and Louise hit it off immediately. As soon as I took Lori off my shoulders, we sat down to eat. The four children found company in each other, and the adults could only follow along. Considering the cost of fare rides these days, it didn't take long before I had spent a couple of $100s. Mary and Charles decided to have a Sunday family meeting and invited Louise and her children. Louise said she would love to come, but her daughters would be spending the day with their father for the first time since he left for New York. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the children were very tired. Louise had just bathed her daughters and put them to bed when Michael called her. He said he wouldn't be able to pick up the children on Sunday because he was in the emergency room receiving medical care. Looks like he had been beaten again. Louise told him it couldn't be Chastity's husband because he had spent the whole day at the fair with me and the kids. Michael was unhappy about this, so I called my brother to let him know the kids were coming. I left her house around 9 p.m., reluctantly, because we had decided that we would start dating on Sunday. I picked up the new ladies in my life at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and went to my brother's house. Julie and her current interest were already there, and my mom and dad were also present. Charles's entire family was in place, and my two oldest children arrived last. It was a big event for my brother, as it was the first time in his entire married life that I was in his house. Mary was delighted to introduce Louise and her two daughters to everyone, and it didn't take long before they were accepted. What got interesting for me was when my oldest son said we needed to talk. We moved to the edge of Charles's property. "Dad, I was wrong," Jake said. "I succumbed to my mother's manipulations. She set me up when I came to you last week. Uncle Charles and several of my colleagues explained everything to me." "What lesson did you learn?" I asked. "When it comes to family, first of all," Jake said, "the best thing to do is to stay away because no matter what you do, you're only making things worse. You need to let them figure it out on their own, in their own time, not yours." "You're right," I said, "but this is the hardest thing we do because we care so much. Your mother and I will be able to talk to each other someday, but that day is still far away because of the way she behaved." "Behavior," Jake repeated. "Yes, behavior, because that's the only thing that can't be argued or explained," I continued. "Look at Louise. She stayed in a loveless marriage until she thought she could raise her daughters on her own. She chose to be patient until the time was right for her. Her behavior says more about her character than anything else. Your mother's behavior stunned your sister and me because of the cruelty with which she did it. No matter what she says with her voice, her behavior makes most of what she says a lie. One of the things our grandfather taught us when we were young is that if I'm not worthy of honesty, then you're not worth lying to." "Dad," Jake said sadly, "the question must be asked, what else did she lie about?" "That's a question that will never be answered," I said. "There's no point in wasting time looking back, son. All we can do is learn from it and move forward. I like what I see in Louise, but the more I learn about Michael and Mom, the more I think they deserve each other." Julie came up to us and said, "Your conversation is starting to attract attention. Maybe you can leave the rest for later." "We're done, sister," Jake said. I just needed to apologize to Dad." Jake walked away, and Julie asked, "What was that about?" "A bad case of foot and mouth disease," I explained. It's good to see that he had the sense to admit it. Charles and Mary had a wonderful dinner. Mary took many photographs of us together, and everyone liked the way Lori kept an eye on me when the kids started a water fight. I joined in, of course. It ended 4-1, and I was soaking wet before they got tired. I was sitting in the lounge chair drying off when Lori climbed into my lap and fell asleep. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Mary and Louise talking about the developing relationship between me and her daughters. My father sat down next to me and said, "This little girl has already chosen you. Be careful and make sure you're not getting into this just to get revenge on Michael." I told him about our relationship from the day Louise first called me. He smiled and said, "I should have listened to my thoughts on this. Your mother asked me to have this conversation with you. Whatever you decide in the future, you both have my support." "Dad, look at our society as a whole," I said. An avid Democrat, most like one of this country's greatest presidents, John F. Kennedy, denies his membership, runs for the same office on the Republican ticket, and wins. In the next election, the most conservative members of Congress refuse to run again. What the Republicans are left with is more consistent with the views Kennedy had. However, the media fills the airwaves with hatred, propaganda, and lies, making him a traitor to the democratic values he has always upheld. He hasn't changed, but the opinions of those who look at him have changed. He's still a Kennedy Democrat. Now they are trying to convict him for something he says he didn't do and remove him from office. At the same time, they are trying to elect to the same position a person who claims to have done what the president is accused of doing. "What is the meaning of this statement?" asked my father. "They have the same idea of truth, honesty, behavior, and morality as my soon-to-be ex-wife. Those who are not New Democrats are just pieces of crap that they want to wash out of society. Truth, honesty, and good behavior mean nothing to them until they are convicted and imprisoned. Then they falsely claim that they are very sorry." My father laughed and replied, "People need to learn to flush 100% of the truth they see in the media and social networks down the toilet. Finding honesty in real life is hard enough for anyone, however, most are too stupid to understand this. It amazes me that we are seeing two versions of Democrats fighting each other. This simple truth explains a lot. Beyond that, considering all the accomplishments he has achieved despite all his opponents, I wonder if it is because of their hatred or because of how incompetent their accomplishments look compared to his." I continued, "Most of those running for re-election have years of experience achieving nothing but getting re-elected again." "Damn, Clint, that's a strong statement." My dad said, "It just goes to show how effective the media is as a propaganda machine." On Monday, while I was in my office, a detective came to talk to me about the ongoing problem with Michael Truscott. It took me about an hour to explain to him what I knew and provide the list of women whose spouses had just found out about his affairs with their wives. "Officer, I suggest you go and talk to Brenda Ferguson and ask her for the list," I said. More than 6 weeks had passed since I learned about their relationship. Louise, Michael's wife, called me to tell me what they were planning. It had been at least 4 weeks since they went on a romantic trip. I met his wife for the first time while he was in New York with my wife. Since then, because of what was going on with our spouses, his soon-to-be ex-wife and I have grown closer and are now in a relationship that we are still trying to figure out. "It definitely paints a different picture," the detective said. "Michael Truscott seems to blame you for ruining his marriage rather than his behavior. I'm starting to think he's one of those people who can't take responsibility for anything and blames someone else." After he left, I called Brenda and told her what had just happened. She expected this to happen. Michael was the type of person who would set others up, and she believed he was behind her dismissal from the firm. Brenda then told me that my wife had finally found herself a lawyer. I found out when I returned home to my parents that it was my mother's letter that made Chastity give up. Until then, she still thought that something could be worked out between us. Once I cooled down after everything that had happened, I realized that Chastity must have believed that I sent this letter out of revenge. On Wednesday, Julie and I took Louise and her daughters to dinner at Olive Garden, where we were joined by my sons. During dinner, I revealed that Chastity had finally hired a lawyer to negotiate the terms of her divorce. Both of Louise's daughters seemed excited about Julie for some reason, and Julie was happy about the attention. Overall, Louise and I thought the dinner was a success. 2 months had passed since the last family meeting. On Friday afternoon, I sat next to Brenda Ferguson, waiting to be called before Judge Donald McDonald. My soon-to-be ex-wife and her lawyer, a divorce lawyer from the same firm, were sitting across from me in the hall. We agreed on the division of property. Since there was no mortgage on the house, it was quite simple. Chastity agreed to buy out my share of the house based on the current appraisal and give me half of our joint savings. When we were called before the judge, each of us had to confirm that we agreed with everything. As soon as we did this, the divorce was finalized. Chastity stopped me on the front steps as I was heading into the parking lot and said, "I ruined myself. I finally admitted my behavior to our sons." Julie still refuses to talk to me because she thinks what I did was intentional. I only wish I had seen earlier what kind of message I was sending. I would accept that explanation from our daughter because of her inexperience in life, I said, but from an adult, it sounds so self-confident and superficial. Louise's divorce had already been finalized. She got everything she could out of him. Michael was to pay $3,000 a month in child support, $500 each until they were 18, and half the cost of their post-secondary education. The house they owned was to be sold, and the profits divided equally. For some reason, Michael left the company and moved to another city, opening his own business. It seems that his constant encounters with fists when he least expected them got to him. With the share he received from the company, he was provided for life. My parents invited Louise and the girls over for dinner. What we didn't know was that my parents also invited Louise's parents. Given the developing relationship between Louise and me, they decided it was time to start getting to know her family in case something serious developed between us. Brenda Ferguson negotiated with the insurance company responsible for the firm's liability insurance. It looks like the case will be resolved out of court. After paying her 30% share, we will all receive more than $750,000. We all sat around Mom's formal dining room table, which was being used for the first time in years, just relaxing after a big dinner. When I stood up, I pushed back my chair, got down on one knee, and took the ring box out of my pocket. I said, "Louise, will you take a second chance and marry me?" Louise, in complete shock, said, "Yes." That's when the real party started. Mom had to call Charles, Mary, and my 2 sons about the good news. They arrived within half an hour. Amidst all the excitement, I noticed Lori was crying, so I walked over to her as she sat on the floor and sat down next to her. She immediately climbed onto my lap. "What happened, baby?" I asked quietly. "No, nothing. I'm just happy that you're going to be my dad," Lori said. I looked at Louise, who had tears in her eyes. I think she could see them in mine, too. I stood up holding Lori and walked over to her mother. Everyone understood that this was an important moment. "Mom," Livia said, "when Mom and you get married, will we also take your last name?" "As soon as the court allows," was my answer. "Livia and Lori," my father said, "from now on, you can call us grandparents, okay?" My only thought was how much time my new daughters would spend with my parents. Both enjoyed the prospect of spending time on the farm. My father would teach them how to ride horses in no time. Later, in private, Louise asked me how I was going to convince Michael Truscott to let me adopt his daughters and legally change their last name to mine. I said, "Leave it up to me." Then the search for a home began in earnest. The plan was for Louise and the girls to move there before our wedding. About a month later, I showed up unexpectedly at Michael Truscott's office. His secretary told me to come in. I walked in and closed the door behind me. His face had begun to heal, but his appearance had changed greatly. He had been beaten 8 times. The detective had interviewed all of his former lovers and their spouses, but he still had no firm suspicions. I decided to take the risk that he truly believed I was responsible for the disfigurement on his face. "I think you heard that Louise and I are getting married," I said before he looked up. Michael's face went white as he looked up, seemingly convinced that I was the person responsible for his injuries. "What do you want from me?" he said fearfully. "I need your permission in the form of a legal document to adopt your daughters so they can legally take my last name." This is not my wish, but the wish of Livia, who asked her mother and me if she and her sister could take my last name. This must be done in a way that legally recognizes us both as their fathers and allows them to change their last name to mine. Why should I consider this? He said. This will get you away from me forever. If you don't agree, I said, you and I can meet often. It took him half an hour to type and print the document I asked for. I knew he didn't really care about his daughters because I hadn't seen them since he left for New York. His secretary, who was also a notary, certified the document and stamped it. According to Louise, he only married her because she became pregnant. When his family found out, he was pressured into proposing. I made it to the school where Louise taught kindergarten just as she was letting the class go. I had to go into the office because they didn't know me at school. I asked one of the employees to call her to the office. When Louise arrived, she was surprised to see me. Louise, I made a promise to your daughters on the day of our engagement, I said, handing her the envelope I had taken from my inside jacket pocket. I think this will allow us to give them what they want. She took it, opened it, and read the enclosed document. How? She asked, her eyes filling with tears. Michael still believes I'm behind his face being met with fists, I said. I used his fear to my advantage to achieve this for us. I thought we could arrange it so that on our wedding day, Livia and Lori could legally take my last name. Julie told me the night we got engaged that you always keep your word, Louise said. Especially in front of a child. Do you think Brenda Ferguson will take care of the adoption papers and file them in court? I'll call her office, I said, taking my cell phone out of my pocket. The secretary should be able to answer this question. If she can, I'll make an appointment so you can come. The office secretary, a woman, couldn't help but overhear our conversation and said, Louise, have you set a date? No, Louise replied. I wanted to, but Clint said he wouldn't do it until he found a way to convince Michael to let him adopt my daughters, Louise said. He felt that if we were going to be a family, the kids should get what they want. When we say our vows, we will be able to meet with Brenda later that afternoon. She was delighted for both of us. Within 20 minutes, she prepared the necessary documents and printed them with the notary statement provided by me. They were due to be filed in court by the end of the day. It took a week before we found out that my adoption and their last name change would be approved. All they wanted to know was when it would take effect. To resolve this, we held a family meeting. We scheduled it for Sunday because the movers would still be moving Louise's and the kids' things to our new home. The rest of the week, Louise and I were at work. The next morning, the detective investigating the ongoing attacks on Michael Truscott visited us to tell us that 2 arrests had been made. One of those arrested was another senior partner at the firm with whom Michael had slept, and an African-American man who still believed they were in a relationship. Both of those arrested were men. My brother Charles and his wife met us on Sunday. On Monday, we were the last ones to arrive. We came with a huge pot of Boston baked beans that Louise had made. It was a potluck brunch. After the greetings, my future father-in-law asked, "What's new?" "We want to announce that in 2 weeks, 6 days before Christmas," I said. "If we can use the little shed for our parents' equipment, 2 things will happen. First, Louise and I will exchange vows, and second, the adoption of Livia and Lori will be completed. All 3 will take the name Walker. We will be spending our honeymoon next summer with our daughters." Louise added, "It will be held at either Disneyland or Disney World." There was a commotion, but in a quiet moment, Livia came over to me, sat on my lap, and said, "Thank you, Dad." "For what?" I asked. "Because you love us enough to keep your word," she replied. I couldn't answer because the 10-year-old's words, which sounded so sincere, left me speechless. I just took her into my arms and hugged her tightly. "What do you think of our story today?" In my opinion, the wife was totally wrong and should have told her husband she didn't want to be with him. What's your opinion? Let me know in the comments. See you later.